Hello everyone, welcome to Mr. Noctory. Tonight, we're stepping into a nighttime journey, becoming a sailor on a Greek warship, a trireme. In the year 429, before the Common Era, during wartime, where every meal is a prayer and every wave is a sentence, you're about to become a sailor on a Greek warship. Not a hero, not a captain, just one of the 170 hunched backs sitting in the bottom row in a narrow hold, with the smell of dead rats beneath your feet and injured slaves beside you. Before we begin, if this actually feels like a comforting place to hide at night, feel free to hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly want to. No pressure, just like the rules in an old tavern. Only if you need a place to sit in silence. And you know what I love the most? Looking at the comments and seeing where you're watching from and what time it is, whether it's New York or Norway, 1 in the morning or 5 in the morning. You're still here and I see you. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on a small fan if you have one. Not because it's hot, but for that soft humming sound. You weren't born into a noble family. You didn't study with Socrates, and you definitely weren't invited to sit at the Agora Council. You're just an ordinary young man of 5th century Athens, and ordinary here means old enough to be called to row, poor enough to not say no. That morning, a soldier knocks on your door, not gently, the kind of knock that says, "If you don't come out, I'll break the door." You open the door, barley flour still stuck in your hair, barely able to breathe. Before being thrown on the list, new trireme sailor, lower deck. Before you leave home, your mother shoves a sprig of rosemary into your hand and whispers, "Pray to Athena, not just for victory, but for a shoulder that won't pop out." Neighbors stare. One of them grabs the rope used to tie barley stalks and ties it around your wrist as a goodbye. You don't even get to protest before someone hands you a leather strap, not to tie your hair, to tie your wrist to the oar, just in case you accidentally let go during combat. The Athenian warship, the trireme, has 3 levels of rowers. You get assigned to the lowest tier, so low that seawater slaps your face even when it's sunny. Steam mildew, the sound of rats scurrying, a space so damp and suffocating, even Socrates wouldn't find truth in there. You've never rowed anything bigger than a basket of vegetables, but now you're sitting on a warship over 30 meters long, wood trembling under your butt, wind blowing through the hatch, like even Athena has given up on your life. Your trainer, not a philosopher, is a veteran named Cleon, who only says 3 words: in sync, hard, no whining. Anyone who complains gets explained with another oar. You start your first shift with trembling hands, rowing to the beat of the drum. Boom, boom, boom. Tendons ready to snap shoulders like they're being wedged apart, but you don't stop, because the one who stops is the one who dies. You think you've gotten the rhythm, then your right oar slips. You lose balance. Your head hits the wood. The guy behind curses. Seawater splashes into your mouth. Trainer Cleon glances over, doesn't move, doesn't ask. He drops a new oar and yells, "Keep rowing." So you do, blood dripping down your chin. But you don't stop, because the only thing worse than falling is letting people know you fell. Night comes. Athens is no longer a city of poetry or philosophy. It's a harbour, reeking of dead fish and sweat, where rookies like you curl up on planks, dreaming that your arms are still tied to the oar. A rowing buddy whispers, "What are we even? citizens. You look at the oar. No, cogs. You're not a warrior. You're a living machine. But Athens needs you, not to shine, but to carry someone else's glory. An old man with a silver beard sitting near the docks, a veteran from Salamis, looks at rookies like you and says, "Once we rowed 4 days straight, people passed out, still tied to the oars. The last kid alive rowed alone until the Persians broke." No one knows how true the story is, but everyone believes it, because if you don't, you can't row another beat. Athens calls your name, not with medals, but with orders. Get on board. Your tendons tremble, and you realize ancient history wasn't written in ink. It was rowed out by hands like yours. You wake up to the sound of iron striking. Before leaving the cabin, you and the person on your right perform a familiar ritual, tying leather straps around each other's wrists, not to hold the oar, but to hold each other. A friend who used to tie your strap is no longer here today. When your hand touches the empty strap, you understand. On this ship, disappearance is always as light as a wrist tie and as fast as a drum beat. It's not a bell, it's the tip of a spear hitting a wooden barrel, waking every worn-out body as if knocking on a coffin lid. Your arms, your shoulders, your neck no longer belong to you. They are property of the Athenian warship. You no longer dream of fields or sweet grapes. You dream of oars. One stroke, then two, then a missed beat, and a strike to the head. Trainer Cleon no longer needs to yell, just to stare. And that stare slices through your neck like a blade. You learn how to not think, just hear the drum and row. You become rhythm. The warship doesn't run on wind. It runs on people like you. 170 humans, 3 tiers of oars, 34 rows, and only one rhythm. You're not allowed to be off, not even by half a second. If you're off, the man behind you bumps into you. If he bumps, the row behind slips. If that row slips, the bow tilts. And if the bow tilts, Athens loses the battle. You think you're important? No, you are not allowed to be important. You must be synchronized. You must disappear into the drumbeat. A fine day, meaning no one fell overboard. Cleon walks past each row and throws out a question. Do you know why the oar is oval? Silence fills the hull, because Athens doesn't need blades. Athens needs rhythm. Then he laughs, the kind of laugh that needs no humor, only pain. You are no longer a citizen. You are an engine. Athens won't write your name in its chronicles. Athens writes you into the axle. Each stroke moves Athens 1 meter forward, not thanks to the gods, but thanks to you and the backs that will never be honored. You start to feel proud in a strange way when you hear the drum beat. When you feel your shoulder tendons burn in unison with 169 others. You don't know who's rowing to your right or your left, but you know, if you stop, they'll fall. And if they fall, you die. Earlier was dinner, if you can call it that. You got a piece of hard bread, stiff as Hermes' heel, and a sip of seawater mixed vinegar. No fish, no wine, no thanks. You chew in silence, hearing the waves slap the hull like the teeth chattering of those too weak to row anymore. Cleon walks by and tosses you a piece of dried fish, saltier than tears. You don't thank him, you just nod. That night, you lie on your side, hands still tied, belly rumbling like a row of little drums. You're not hungry from lack of food. You're hungry because you have to row again tomorrow. But a few days ago, Athens held a mock battle training. The ship you rode was launched, forced to rotate continuously between two simulated enemy ships. People on shore threw sandbags into the water, shouting like Persians. The captain screamed, "Turn left, row backward, raise your oars." You didn't understand the commands, hit your head on the side of the boat. The guy on your right stepped on your foot by accident. Water splashed into your mouth. You choked, coughed like Poseidon had slapped you with his trident. Cleon yelled, calling you a breathing anchor. You thought you'd be kicked off, but no. The warship turned 180 degrees, didn't sink. Cleon just said, "Don't die before the enemy gets a chance to kill you." You lie on the "because Athens doesn't need blades, Athens needs rhythm." Then he laughs, the kind of laugh that needs no humor, only pain. You are no longer a citizen. You are an engine. Athens won't write your name in its chronicles. Athens writes you into the axle. Each stroke moves Athens 1 meter forward. Not thanks to the gods, but thanks to you and the backs that will never be honored. You start to feel proud, in a strange way, when you hear the drum beat, when you feel your shoulder tendons burn, in unison with 169 others. You don't know who's rowing to your right or your left, but you know, if you stop, they'll fall, and if they fall, you die. Earlier was dinner, if you can call it that. You got a piece of hard bread, stiff as Hermes' heel, and a sip of seawater mixed vinegar. No fish, no wine, no thanks. You chew in silence, hearing the waves slap the hull, like the teeth chattering of those too weak to row anymore. Cleon walks by and tosses you a piece of dried fish, saltier than tears. You don't thank him, you just nod. That night, you lie on your side, hands still tied, belly rumbling like a row of little drums. You're not hungry from lack of food. You're hungry because you have to row again tomorrow. But a few days ago, Athens held a mock battle training. The ship you rode was launched, forced to rotate continuously between two simulated enemy ships. People on shore threw sandbags into the water, shouting like Persians. The captain screamed, "Turn left, row backward, raise your oars." You didn't understand the commands, hit your head on the side of the boat. The guy on your right stepped on your foot by accident. Water splashed into your mouth, you choked, coughed like Poseidon had slapped you with his trident. Cleon yelled, calling you a breathing anchor. You thought you'd be kicked off, but no. The warship turned 180 degrees, didn't sink. Cleon just said, "Don't die before the enemy gets a chance to kill you." You lie on the deck, looking at the stars. A friend softly says, "I want to be a rower, but the last one alive to tell the story." You are not a warrior, you are software. But in a world where glory is a wave-breaking chariot, you are the oar. Without you, history doesn't move. You thought your home's meat steamer was suffocating. Try imagining 170 Greek men eating raw garlic unwashed for 5 days, sitting on wet wood, and you in the middle. That's not punishment. That's civic duty. No one said you had to love your teammates, but you are required to smell them from dawn, till even the rooster stops crowing from suffocation. In Athens, people debate justice. On an Athenian ship, people fight over the bucket. Not to argue, but to go to the toilet. You lie on the deck, looking at the stars. A friend softly says, "I want to be a rower, but the last one alive to tell the story." You are not a warrior, you are software. But in a world where glory is a wave-breaking chariot, you are the oar. Without you, history doesn't move. You thought your home's meat steamer was suffocating. Try imagining 170 Greek men eating raw garlic unwashed for 5 days, sitting on wet wood, and you in the middle. That's not punishment. That's civic duty. No one said you had to love your teammates, but you are required to smell them from dawn till even the rooster stops crowing from suffocation. In Athens, people debate justice. On an Athenian ship, people fight over the bucket, not to argue, but to go to the toilet. You learn that tolerance begins at the nose and that Greece doesn't need mythical monsters. They have your comrades' unwashed feet. You once thought the sea smelled like salt, but no, it smells like people. The Athenian warship has no private quarters, no dining room, no private breathing space. It is a box holding 170 living machines, sitting elbow to elbow, you between the garlic eater on the left and the guy with pus-dripping feet on the right. Air thick as porridge, but without the porridge, you breathe and feel like you just ate someone else's skin layer. Sweat hits the wooden floor, never gets a chance to dry. When you sit down, your butt sticks to where someone else just left. Your so-called bed is a wooden plank long enough to bend your back, not wide enough to forget reality. There are rats as big as Spartan oaths, rats that steal hard bread, rats that crawl into the leather strap pouch, rats that give birth in your socks. Someone screams after stepping on a dead rat and gets scolded for being louder than the command drum. Do you still think Athens is the peak of civilization? It still is, but you're living in the belly of that civilized ship, where the toilet is a leaky bucket in the corner, next to the water tub soaking bread. You watch someone wipe their hands on your shirt. You say nothing, because you just did that to someone else this morning. One afternoon, it rains. Everyone is ordered to lie still, to avoid spilling water into the rowing lines. You hear the rain, but you also hear someone's stomach and beard scratching and someone softly crying. No one asks why, because if you speak, you'll cry too. At night, if you wake from a nightmare, you don't know if it was a dream or real. Maybe you dreamed you were stuck under the oars, or that the ship capsized and no one saved you, because they thought you were a garlic sack. A boy named Lysandros mutters, "If there's a next life, I want to be bread." Why? Because at least bread doesn't have to smell anyone's armpit. You gradually learn to endure the garlic smell and the bloody nose from seasickness and the stench of rotten fish. After pulling the wrong supply sack from Corinth, you slowly learn to smile with your eyes because no one has the energy to open their mouth anymore. And strangely, you don't hate them. You learn to sit close to someone without shame. You learn to share your last piece of fish with someone who has no teeth left. You learn to hear someone quietly sob and offer them your leather strap. And one night, when the sea is calm, you smell the sea, truly. Not the smell of salt, but the shared exhale of 170 survivors. You think, maybe, Athens wasn't built with stone, but with people who knew how to share a single breath. There is an ancient rule at sea. Those who chew fast get stomach aches first. Those who chew slowly get their food stolen. You start to understand why the gods always reside on Mount Olympus, where there is no dried fish and no hard bread. No one dreams of becoming a sailor for the food, and after a few days at sea, you realize meals here aren't for enjoyment. They exist, like a test of your ability to survive in silence. You think being vegetarian is hard? Try eating dry bread soaked in seawater for 3 consecutive days, then talk again. That's not breakfast. That's an experiment in patience and stomach elasticity. On a Greek warship, there are no chefs. There's a person called the distributor who hands out food from the supply barrel. If the rats haven't eaten it first, you sit next to the guy you cursed at yesterday, both dipping bread into murky water with a strange smell. Both of you stay silent, not because you're still angry, but because it's too tough to chew and talk at the same time. Each meal consists of a slice of barley bread as hard as cobblestone, a handful of olives salted, who knows when, some dried fish from the last campaign, and the hope of no diarrhea today. Sometimes you're rewarded with wine, diluted with seawater, because the captain believes salt sharpens the will. You think, I'm drinking Poseidon's tears. One day, a supply boat from Delos passed by. It brought raw onions. The whole ship erupted. People cried. People laughed. People kissed the onions like long-lost lovers. You held your onion tightly, like clutching a living soul. Someone whispered, I used to have a wife, but she never moved me like this onion does. Dinner is often the most dangerous time, not because of enemies, but because everyone is hungry. Everyone looks at someone else's food, like inheritance. A boy named Demetrios was accused of taking an extra olive. He denied it, but someone saw an olive pit fall from his foot. The entire cabin fell silent. Then, he split the remaining olive in half, handing it to the accuser. No one said anything else. That was the only form of apology. When your stomach is empty, you eat and learn to chew slowly, not to savor, but because you're not sure. There will be another meal. You don't wish to feel full. You just wish not to throw up after eating and not to swallow a fishbone by accident. One night, strong winds came. The ship tilted. The pot of food spilled onto the deck. 170 people watched. A thin porridge form a circle, then disappear through the wooden cracks. No one spoke, only a sigh and a soft mumble. Poseidon, if you can hear this, next time don't take the porridge. You learn that even gods, if they ever tasted Greek dried fish, would give up immortality. Life isn't measured by meat. A single olive can save one's honor. One timely meal can keep a soldier from deserting. And in the end, you realize you don't eat just to live, you eat to have the strength to keep rowing toward a place even you don't know. They say there was a man named Theocles who once slept for 30 minutes straight on a ship without getting kicked in the face. No one knows if his name was real, but at the port of Piraeus, someone carved his face into stone like a sleep god for sailors. As for you, you just need 10 minutes. No dreams, no kicks, no sound of waves. But that's a daydream. Oh Hypnos, god of sleep, if you happen to pass by Athens Warship number 17, please don't forget me again tonight. You whisper in your mind, then open your eyes again, because a drop of seawater just fell into your mouth. Sleeping on a Greek warship is a prank made by the gods and left without a bug fix. No bed, no pillow, not even a place you can call yours. You lie between 2 other men, one dreaming of war, the other sleep-talking mom in Doric, all sweating, snoring, and occasionally kicking you because they think you're an enemy in their dream. The sound of waves doesn't lull you to sleep. It pounds against the hull as if Poseidon is testing drums for doomsday. Add to that the creak of wood, the scamper of rats, the turning of bodies, and the pungent stench of 170 bodies merging into a symphony. That keeps you awake all night. You curl up in a wet cloak, trying to shut your eyes. But the cold wind sneaks in like a thief, slipping through folds of fabric strands of hair and biting into your spine. One night, someone fell asleep clutching an oar by morning. His hands were still gripping the wood, as if his body no longer knew what was man, what was tool. Another shouted in his sleep, "I don't want to be a war god. I just want to sell wine at the Athens market." You start to see clearly. Sleep here isn't a reward. It's the second battlefield, where your soul must also wear armor, so it doesn't get eroded by despair. You dream of Athens, of straw beds of your mother. But waking up is a cold wooden floor, a command to gather, and a gust of wind slicing your neck. You learn to sleep while standing, sleep while rowing, sleep while someone next to you just vomited on your shoes. You don't remember the last time you truly slept. Some say to sleep on a trireme. You must be a philosopher, for only those who let go of hope can rest in this floating hell. You only know, if someone gave you a dry blanket, you'd gladly offer your daughter's hand in marriage, if you had one. In the world of oars and salted blood, a full night's sleep is the rarest treasure. Not gold, not trophies, but 5 minutes. Without dreaming, you're sinking to the bottom of the Aegean. Before everything begins, you and your crew are ordered to be silent, not to pray, but to offer. A dried fish, a bit of diluted wine, and an old drachma coin are placed on a worn wooden plank at the ship's bow. A makeshift altar for Poseidon. No one truly believes he's listening, but no one dares to skip it either. Because the sea doesn't forget, and the sea god forgives even less. Early morning. The sea is flat like a cold bronze plate. No birds, no wind, just a thick silence, as if the ocean is holding its breath with you. You don't know if you woke up from the cold, the hunger, or a dream where there was no sun. You were dreaming of toasted bread. Then the drum strikes, not a gentle beat, but a thud, like Poseidon throwing a tantrum. You shoot up, smashing your head on the mast. Someone else shouts, "A fight? A real fight?" and immediately vomits into the drinking barrel. On a Greek warship, the drum isn't for summoning souls, it's for commanding them. It is the clock, the siren and the GPS of the ancient world. All in one drummer who usually wears nothing but a towel and a strange grin. The drum echoes across the deck. 3 beats, the whole crew must form attack formation. 1 beat, align 2 fast beats, maintain speed, prepare for impact. 5 rapid beats, maybe hand cramps or someone fainted. You don't know who's on the other side. Could be Sparta, could be Persia, could be another Athens team, because people often mix up drills with declarations of war. All you know is the warship is turning, waves start slanting, and you are sitting among 170 men panicking while pretending not to. The commander stands at the bow, shouting with a voice like crushed gravel. This is glory, this is destiny, this is the moment Athens remembers your names. All you remember is your mum's name. You hear the drum beating like the heartbeat of a giant beast. No trumpets, no flags, no war cries. Only the drum and the eyes of your crewmates, reflecting exactly what you're trying to hide. Fear. The entire rowing crew simultaneously lifts their oars, then slams them down, like the clumsy legs of an ancient creature. Every stroke is a prayer. Every beat is an omen in rhythm. You glance at the enemy ship. They're rowing too. Drums, too sweat, too. The same look of someone about to realize death doesn't need much of a reason. And then it comes. The first collision. That sound isn't like in ancient plays. It's not tragic. It's not heroic. It's like two public toilets smashing into each other. Wood cracks. Oars snap, people are thrown. You try to balance yourself, only to discover you're rowing without water. The ship is stuck. The trireme's nose jammed into the enemy side. The drums shift to a reverse rhythm. But how do you reverse when someone's head is wedged between the oars? At that moment, you realize the drum isn't for motivation. It's to drown out the fear. Because if you could hear your own heartbeat, you wouldn't be able to row another stroke. You thought you'd be a hero with a gleaming bronze shield standing under blue skies shouting your parents' names. But the battlefield you got was a rotting wooden bench, a paddle that smelled like spoiled fish, and the groans of someone who just got stabbed by an anchor hook. And you sit there staring into the vast emptiness beyond the bow, where there should be an enemy, but now it's just you and the sea. In school, they taught you war was about courage, but no one taught you what to do when your warship has no more oars, no more voice shouting orders, and the sky keeps spinning like a pot on fire. You're not fighting, you just don't want to drown. You always thought the battlefield was where swords clashed, shields blocked, blood ran like rivers, like in the epic films, like the songs Homer sang, where Achilles runs across the meadow, where arrows blaze in the setting sun. But no one told you about battles, with no enemies, only exhaustion from within. And then you wake up to the smell of salt water, feet stuck to the rocking deck, and realize today's battlefield doesn't have a single sword, no sound of steel clashing, only bones breaking, alone echoing under the whistling wind through the broken mast. No banners flying, only snapped ropes twisted around someone's ankle, dragging them along the side of the ship, like a dried squid being punished. You try to reorient yourself, but there's no land, no solid point, only the water, where every movement makes you feel like you're falling, and falling and falling again, but into fear. A sailor lies next to you, still gripping the paddle like he could row back in time. He says nothing, just stares at the sky, as if counting whether Zeus is sighing. No one has a sword, some are bare-handed, some pick up broken wood, not to fight, but to stay afloat, because the real battle is not to sink. You hear someone shout, "Reverse," but reverse to where? The ship's stuck, the deck tilted, and the paddle, your only weapon, now lies silent under the water, like the sea has kept it for good. You touch the leather string around your neck, not a talisman, but a promise to someone you once left behind. That's when you understand. The real battlefield isn't in the collision. It's in how you keep yourself from disappearing. Before blood is spilled, they pour wine. A goat is slit at the throat, its blood spreading across the deck, like a contract with Ares. Take its blood, spare ours. But the sea doesn't keep records. Poseidon doesn't show mercy, just because you know how to perform rituals. You won, the enemy ship shattered, like bread soaked in wine. Your ship, though leaking in a few places and smelling like a public bath after a Dionysus festival, still floats, A miracle. Bodies drift. No triumphant music, only the sound of waves slapping the hull like mocking applause. You don't laugh. No one does. Victory at sea, it turns out, isn't like winning in a theatre. No clapping, only salt on every wound, and a smell you can't wash off. The smell of people. A young sailor finds a bronze helmet from the other side, stuffed with seaweed, raises it like a trophy. Then he vomits. The helmet falls into the sea. No one picks it up. You once thought victory would make your heart swell like Heracles' chest, but it only makes your chest hurt, like someone split it with an axe and forgot to close it back up. Behind you, the war drum still beats, though no one is playing. The sound packs into your ears like a question. For what? For Athens' glory? For your family's honor? Or just because you didn't have the courage to jump off the ship when you still could? The captain steps forward, holding a warped piece of wood they call the victory signal. He shouts something. You don't hear it. You just stare at your hands, where blood has dried into cracked lines, like a map leading to nowhere. A friend, the one who used to crack olives with his teeth, now has no teeth, only wide open eyes, staring at the charred mast, like he's already seeing the next world. You pull a cloth over him, not out of righteousness, just because you don't want to see yourself in him. You thought you'd be honored when you got home. But what is there to say? That you survived by hiding under the deck when the enemy's prow pierced through? That you didn't shout the gods' names, only whispered for your mother? The sea calms, the sun rises, and you sit among survivors. No one speaks, not because they can't, but because some pain, if spoken aloud, would take the soul with it. Now you get it. Every victory is a notch in the bone. And even if history calls it a triumph, you call it a sentence suspended. And maybe, if you close your eyes long enough, you'll still hear that sound, the oars, and someone's voice, slurred faint, trying to sing a victory song on a ship that no longer knows where it's drifting, because someone in a faraway Athens will carve your name in stone. They won't know you cried. They won't know you threw up. They won't know you almost died from fear. They'll only know you were the victorious. And that's enough for a statue. But you know, statues don't know the smell of blood, and you can't forget it. You step onto the harbour of Piraeus to the sound of cheers, but no one looks at you. They push and crane their necks for the commander, the general, the one with a first and last name. And you, the one who rode like your soul was carved from wood, are just a blurry line in the book of victories. The epics will remember the victory at Salamis, but forget that you once stitched up a comrade's wound with fabric torn from your own undergarment. You survived, but the epics don't mention you. No verse describes how you hid beneath your friend's corpse to dodge a spear. No heroic song tells of the fall that broke two of your ribs and how you still swam back to the ship with blood mixing into the sea. Epic poetry, the stuff carved onto goat skin and chiseled into columns, only names those who stood at the prow, the ones with feathered helmets, polished armor, and voices that echoed louder than the war drum. They're the ones announced, sculpted, immortalized, even though in battle they were the only ones who didn't hold an oar. You remember clearly, your commander, General Lysandros, stood on deck, not a drop of blood on him. He shouted, "Charge!" as the ship's nose slammed into the enemy, then retreated inside, claiming to observe tactics from a distance. But that night, he was the first to get poured a drink, the first name engraved on the bronze plaque. And you got a stale biscuit and a pat on the back. Now you understand history isn't fair. It never meant to be written for the ones who row. It's written for the ones who steer, even if they steer straight into hell. Somewhere, maybe in Athens, maybe in Sparta, poets will sit around the fire singing of glory, of victory, of the brilliant strategy of General Lysandros. They'll describe the battlefield like a chessboard, where pieces move by the commander's will. No one mentions that those pieces feel pain, no fear, mourn the friend they once split a dried fish with. You'll return, maybe alive, maybe with both legs, but no one will know your name. No one will ask, what did you feel when you charged into the spearhead? You might scream in the night. You might bang your head against the mast. You might cry quietly when you see a broken oar. But in the epics, there is only song, no sobbing. And you know this, if anyone remembers you, it's someone who wasn't written down either. Another sailor who also lived, also sat silently on the deck, also listened to the epics and didn't hear himself. And in Athens, a child is learning to read Homer. They'll grow up thinking only Achilles knew pain. And you're just the oar. The paper's background, a drifting soul inside poetry that was never meant for you. You're sitting on a ship's deck, stained with dry blood, the sound of waves clapping like fake applause for someone who just survived. The other sailors are silent, as if even breathing too loudly might shatter the dream of returning home. You've survived 3 summers and 2 winters at sea. You've smelled more rotting fish than perfume. You once screamed into a storm, not to beg Poseidon for mercy, but to shout at the wind, I'm not dead yet. Your feet are swollen like 2 wine jars, forgotten in the corner of a public bathhouse. Your back is so hunched, if you keep rowing, you'll be able to lick your own neck, a skill no one ever asked for. You sleep less than an insomniac owl, but in your heart, something still lingers, not faith. Faith got tossed into the sea, along with your ex-lover's dress before you set sail, not hope of being named in some epic that's now more ridiculous than trying to win an olive from an Athenian housewife. But a dream quiet and stubborn, like olive tree roots, to live as a person, not a shouting oar. You dream of a morning where you don't wake before the sun, to touch a paddle cold as a curse. You dream of a breakfast with soft bread, instead of the kind so hard it could double as a weapon. You dream of seeing Athens without looking through bloody fingers, of seeing a child you've never met, of asking your mother, did I make you proud? Even if the answer is no. An old friend once said, there are things you shouldn't bring aboard. A mirror, compassion, and homesickness. But you brought all 3. The mirror broke. The compassion hardened. But the homesickness still lies quietly somewhere between the torn fabric inside your tunic. One evening, the silver moon dusted the deck, like dirt on old armor. You sat there, hunched back, aching legs, hollow eyes, but a breeze brushed your cheek, and for a moment, you smiled, not because you were happy, but because you could still feel the wind, which means you haven't turned to stone. A friend sitting next to you whispered, if we survive, I'll open a little tavern near the market. You didn't answer, but inside you knew. You'd visit just to see if he kept his word. Maybe neither of you will survive, but that dream, know that promise, outlives even the sea. Greek sailors don't die from spears, they die when their hearts stop dreaming. When dreams become as distant as a Homeric verse no one bothers to copy. You don't know if you'll live tomorrow, but tonight, you dream. You bend over the water, and for the first time in your life, you don't see yourself as a sailor, not as a survivor, not as a hero, but as a soul lost in the night, staring back at itself from the deep. The Aegean Sea isn't a battlefield, it's a mirror for the one about to be forgotten. The Eastern Sea is dark, the color of lead, as if the sky is swallowing all the unsaid things. Tonight, more than ever, you feel something like a discovery. You are not an oar, you are a person. On deck, your comrades' faces glow in the flicker of oil lamps. One exhales and stretches his arm. One brushes his hair. Another stares at his chest, where a folded letter lies. Everyone is doing the thing that feels closest to home. You just sit still for the first time in years, not overwhelmed by drums, paddles shouting. The sea is silencing people or gifting them silence. A comrade comes near you, says nothing, just places a small smooth stone in your hand, still warm. When I was little, he says, my grandmother used to put this kind of stone under the pillow at night. The one who doesn't dream is the one about to die. Nearby, someone hums a low old song. The lyrics fall slowly, gently, like somber butterflies in the dark. If I return, Athens, let my pillow be the one who came home. But if I remain beneath the waves, call me the child of the sea. And you suddenly realize even comrades, haggard, bearded, even blotchy, each one carries a private Athens in their heart. It's not just a city, it's the gate behind the house, the meal under the old magnolia, the look from a mother, the arms that once promised to hold back a foot from leaving. On the last night, you don't cry, but the one next to you does. Tears blend with salt. No one can tell the difference. Tomorrow morning, the warship may reach a strange shore or be swallowed in a clash. But tonight is the last night on the Aegean, where you can still dream. Because that is what Greeks, even poor, blind or buried, swore to protect, the right to dream of freedom. You carry no shield, have no laurel wreath. Your name won't be carved on stone like the generals. But maybe, centuries from now, a scholar will flip through a faded epic and whisper, there was a sailor, nameless, who lived and dreamed on the night before the battle. Because not everyone needs to return to be remembered. Some just need one peaceful night before death. And that's enough. You turn over in a restless sleep, and in that moment, you dream of a cemetery, not a hero cemetery. No towering stone columns or bronze horse-riding statues. Just a dry patch of land scattered with stones that bear nothing. No names, no dates, no lines of honor. Only the sea wind blowing through and grass growing from human bones. The ancient Greeks believed that if someone died without their name being spoken, they would wander forever at the edge of Hades, unable to enter, unable to return. A person with no name isn't truly deceased. They're an echo trapped between two worlds. You open your eyes, the warship still drifts, you are still alive. And then you realize something, both sad and oddly funny. Among the hundreds who've rowed all these years, only a few will be remembered. The rest No one knows. You glance at the comrade slumped asleep beside you. He once saved you when your boat capsized off Delos. Once split with you a half bottle of awful wine. Once told you about the old dog back home he missed so badly it made him cry. But his name, you're not sure you remember. When you reach shore, there will be no trumpet, no laurel wreath, just the smell of sweat and an order to start unloading. You might survive, but who will you be? A Greek may die poor, die hungry, die in war. But what they fear most is dying and being forgotten. No epic records the names of those who baked the bread, wiped the blood, patched the sail, or hauled the anchor. No gravestone for the slave rowing on the lowest deck. No one remembers your dreams if you don't carve them in stone yourself. And so, you pick up a broken shard of pottery from the ship's floor. With your fingernail you scratch 2 curved lines into it. Not a name, just a mark. So that if one day you vanish, there's at least something left, just to say, you were here. You don't need to be a legend. You just need not to be forgotten. General Lysandros, 445 to 395, before the Common Era. Lysandros was a Spartan general and the commander of the Spartan navy in the Hellespont. He defeated the Athenians at Aegospotami in the year 405, before the Common Era. The following year, he forced the Athenian leaders to surrender and brought the war to an end. There is very little information about Lysandros' childhood. His father, Aristoclitus, was a member of the Heraclid royal family of Sparta, which claimed descent from the hero Heracles. However, Lysandros' family was poor, and when he was young, he needed the guarantee of a godfather in order to enter military training in Sparta. Chapter 1, 454 before the Common Era. The boy without royal blood. Lysandros was born in Sparta, and from the moment he came into the world, he knew he would never be king. You are in Sparta, sometime in the mid-5th century, before the Common Era. Not dreamy Athens, not bustling Corinth, but Sparta, the harshest city-state in Greece, where no one asks if you're happy, only if you can endure pain. Here, if you don't belong to one of the 2 royal bloodlines, the Agiids or the Eurypontids, you will forever be a supporting piece. No throne, no hope of entering the dual kingship council, only the battlefield and honor. If you survive long enough. Sparta was a rigidly stratified society. At the top were the Spartiates, full warrior citizens, next were the Perioikoi, non-citizen neighbors, and finally the Helots, the massive and despised slave class. Lysandros belonged to the Spartiates, but he was a Spartiate without noble blood, meaning he was just qualified to wield a sword, but not to wield power. Lysandros was born into that context. No one in his family carried royal blood, but he wasn't born to be a tool. He was born with a way of seeing that Spartans often called dangerous. He observed. As a child, Lysandros wasn't noisy. While boys his age were shouting, punching, screaming contests, biting contests, he remained silent. He watched how leaders stood at the front of formation. He noticed how instructors gave orders with their eyes. No need to yell. He remembered what no book taught. Those who truly rule don't need to shout, they make others fall silent. From age 7, like all Spartan boys, Lysandros was sent to the Agony, the most brutal training system in the ancient world. There, children were not taught to live, but to endure. No soft pillows, no loving mother. No bedtime stories, only hard ground, cane whips, and lessons hammered into bone. They taught him to eat little, sleep less, never cry. Anyone who showed emotion was beaten. Anyone who revealed thought was isolated. But in a training camp that turned humans into blades, Lysandros didn't choose to become the sharpest edge. He chose to become the shadow behind the grip. The shadow, not praised, not celebrated, but always there. It followed every wielder of power, remembering their steps, their hesitations, the tremor in their hands. When making decisions, the shadow doesn't shine, it simply waits for the light to misstep, and when they stumble, the shadow is the first to replace them. Sparta didn't need strategists, Sparta needed order followers. But Lysandros didn't follow blindly. He obeyed, but memorized every weakness, even during drills. While others competed in aggression to gain attention, Lysandros stood at the edges, studying footwork, sword paths, and eyes. He knew one thing. The one who strikes first is usually the easiest to read. He didn't need to win every fight, he only needed to learn. Because he wasn't playing to win. He was playing to find out who truly made the rules. He nodded, but never forgot what the system exposed. At 12, when thrown into the wilderness to survive, Lysandros didn't use brute force like the other boys. He convinced another boy to steal food for him. When caught, the boy was beaten. Lysandros stood there, said nothing, did nothing. Not because he was heartless, but because he learned a lesson. In a city-state that worships warriors, it is wisdom that rules from the shadows. In Sparta, they feared weakness, but more than that, they feared silent minds, and Lysandros was that kind of silence. No one thought that boy would go far. No one wrote his name among Sparta's future glory, because he had no royal blood, and in Sparta, that's like being born without a spine. But what no one knew was that inside that silence, there was a dream waiting to impose itself upon all of Greece. A dream that didn't need a throne, only a single voyage, a single grip on the helm, and never letting go again. Chapter 2, 407 before the Common Era. The Admiral's cloak and the ticket to the open sea. Lysandros didn't need to sit on a throne. He just needed to be on the deck of the last ship still standing. You are in the year 407, before the Common Era, the Peloponnesian War. Between Athens and Sparta has lasted almost 25 years, and despite the legend of Spartan iron discipline, the truth is, Sparta is losing, not on land, but at sea. Sparta had its shining moments, but Athens kept responding with rapid and decisive naval battles. The Battle of Cyzicus in 410 was the most painful example. The entire Spartan fleet was sunk, and General Mindaros, Lysandros' predecessor, was killed. In secret halls, the ephors whispered, "We don't need more heroic blood. We need someone who doesn't follow the old formula." Because the Athenians had something the Spartans didn't: a professional navy. On land, Sparta's hoplite, soldiers were the symbol of invincibility. But at sea, they were just people who knew how to swim. Athens had people who knew how to row, to strike, to pivot, to know when to turn back and when to ram straight into the enemy hull. At that moment, the Council of Ephors, the 5 most powerful elders in Sparta, needed a miracle. And they decided to do something Sparta very rarely did. They gave power to someone not of royal blood. That name was Lysandros, a seasoned warrior, and for the first time in nearly 30 years of war, Sparta entrusted its entire fleet to a man without noble lineage. The position of Navarch, Supreme Admiral, was a title that only existed in wartime and had never been held by the same person twice. Sparta designed it as a self-destructing office, after each term to prevent too much power from concentrating in one hand. But now even they, the greatest skeptics, broke their own rules. Because Lysandros didn't ask, yet still received the order to set sail. The official title was Navarch, Supreme Naval Admiral, a position Sparta only granted during war and never to the same man 2 consecutive times. A title without a throne but with a red cloak and command over the entire war fleet. When Lysandros put on that cloak, no one cheered. There was no coronation, no celebratory wine. Only the wary eyes of commanders who had survived humiliating defeats at the hands of Athens, and a question that hung in the air, unspoken. Does this man truly know anything about the sea? But Lysandros didn't need the sea. He needed people. In his first week in office, he didn't demand new ships. He didn't order an attack. Instead, he went drinking. At the port of Ephesus, he sat with sailors. He listened to curses shouted in the night. He sat next to rowers with water saws. He asked a merchant about the price of ship timber in Phrygia. He visited old Persian shipyards. And above all, he met one man, Cyrus, the younger son of the Persian king, Darius. It wasn't just a strategic meeting. It was the beginning of an intimate political relationship, never before seen between Sparta and Persia. Cyrus trusted Lysandros enough to grant him access to his gold reserves. And more than that, he ordered local officials to prioritize supporting the Spartan admiral, as if he were a prince. Lysandros, the man without a throne, spoke like someone who once held the debt book of an entire kingdom. He didn't ask, he didn't beg, he negotiated, and somehow he made a Persian prince commit to pouring gold into Sparta's naval campaign. Soon after Spartan soldiers began receiving full wages, ships were rebuilt. Sailors defected from Athens to work for Lysandros because the pay was better and the commander didn't yell for no reason. Sparta once believed that warriors should fight for honor, not for money. But Lysandros understood. After 2 decades of war, ideals didn't matter anymore. It needed bread and silver. He turned the military from reluctant citizen conscripts into a force that was organized, paid, motivated, and sometimes even hopeful for survival after the battle. In the unofficial journal of an Athenian soldier, a line was written later. We lost, not because they were stronger, but because that man made the whole fleet feel like family, while we didn't even know who held the knife behind our backs. War isn't about strategy. It's about timing, about trust, about making people row toward you, even if the sun is setting behind them. And Lysandros understood that before anyone else. Sparta handed him a ticket to the open sea, and he turned it into a map that led straight to the enemy's heart. No royal blood needed, no gods required, just knowing how to listen in silence and knowing when to stop. Chapter 3, 406, before the Common Era, removed from power but not forgotten. In Sparta, you can defeat the entire Athenian fleet and still lose a vote. Lysandros didn't lose a battle. He wasn't betrayed. He didn't face any overwhelming wave. He was simply replaced, like a nail that had done its job holding the roof and now had to make room for a new one, shinier, more Spartan. In 406, before the Common Era, after a series of victories that brought prestige and gold to Sparta, the Council of Ephors did what Spartan law required. No one could hold the title of Navarch 2 consecutive times. Not even Lysandros, even if he was the one helping Sparta see the first glimpse of hope to defeat Athens. His replacement was Callicratidas, a commander, extremely loyal to Spartan tradition. To many Ephors, Callicratidas was a pure Spartan in every sense. He didn't bow to Persia. He disliked anything called soft diplomacy. He was the classical model, as if pulled straight out of Lycurgus's era, to remind Sparta, honor above all. And then he died in the Battle of Arginusi, a disaster that nearly wiped out the entire Spartan fleet. That battle wasn't just a tactical failure, it was a death knell for outdated beliefs. Callicratidas went down with a ship that took no silver from Persia. And the Athenian fleet, though commanded by men who had only just learned to row, won through pragmatism. The consequences weren't only for Sparta. On the other side, Athens was shaken too. The people were furious that generals didn't rescue drowning sailors, and they executed the very men who had brought them victory. A world was slowly losing faith in ideals, only believing in those who knew how to survive and waited for the right moment to return. He was no longer the admiral, but he never stopped working. He was seen appearing at small harbors where soldiers who once served under his command were still around. There were no more sails bearing the Spartan flag, but still hands were raised to greet him, not out of rank, but out of memory. In Ionia, a few small towns joked that the sea breeze still turns wherever Lysandros walks by. Lysandros wasn't in power, but he still visited allied cities, still met old captains, still whispered to aristocrats tired of Athens. He didn't give orders. He only left behind unanswered questions. If Athens falls, who will keep the peace? If there is one admiral who understands both Athens and Cyrus, would Sparta dare to call his name again? He wasn't standing in the fleet anymore, but every sail that left the shore was a reminder. He was still there. Cyrus didn't forget him. The Persian commanders didn't forget him. Even a few Athenian generals couldn't stop mentioning his name in meetings. If he returns, we'll be fighting a man who doesn't need a title to be obeyed. In Sparta, you could be dismissed, but you couldn't be forgotten. If you were Lysandros, the man who didn't need a flag to have an army, the man who didn't need a chair to control the whole board. Chapter 4, 405. Before the Common Era. The Battle of Aegospotami, when silence killed more than swords. Some victories don't require a fight, just waiting for the enemy to fall on their own. No trumpet sounded, no orders to attack in the night, no glorious battle to be sung about. Just a repetition, so boring. It dulled the senses, and a trap set with patience. In the summer of 405, before the Common Era, Lysandros was reinstated as admiral. Officially or not, no one dared to ask. Everyone knew. If you wanted to beat Athens, you called back Lysandros. Even if the law forbade it, even if the title had to be changed to fleet assistant, you still brought him back. He returned. No fanfare, no parades, just the sea breeze and a few eyes that had seen enough of Athens' arrogance. The decisive battle took place at Hellespont, where the sea's throat narrows and every sail must whisper through. Lysandros's main opponent was General Philocles, a man known for his toughness and a certain arrogance in Athenian military circles. He was the one who had controversially ordered the execution of 200 captured Spartan sailors earlier, an action that escalated the war to merciless levels. Philocles and General Conon, the actual commander, shared unclear authority. Conon, more cautious and somewhat softer, wanted to stay vigilant against Lysandros, but Philocles believed the opponent was old and toothless. That confidence, along with the routine of landing troops daily, was the spark Lysandros waited for. Lysandros remained silent. Each morning he sent his fleet out to sea, and then brought them back early. No attacks, no provocations, just to wear down Athens' patience. But in the shadows, Lysandros didn't sit still. He planted spies to observe Athens' camp routines, mealtimes, sleep hours, even when soldiers went ashore to play dice or wash their tunics. Every small habit was noted, every carelessness recorded. At the same time, he quietly sent messages to Athens' allied city-states. Internal cracks were widening, and he just needed one large enough for the wind to slip through. Each day that passed, the Athenian troops relaxed further. They went fishing, they drank on shore, napped, washed their clothes, bragged about old victories. Some even brought seals back as pets, as if they were camping in the countryside. On the 5th day, Lysandros struck. He attacked while they were having lunch. No defenses, no warning. The entire Athenian fleet was captured almost without resistance. In less than an hour, Athens had no navy left. No epic was written about the slaughter, just a memory of an interrupted lunch, and Spartan sails gliding past like cold blades slicing through an entire era. Lysandros didn't shout. He simply stood on the ship, quietly watching Athenian wreckage pulled ashore like dragging ashes from a once blazing fire. When people asked, "What did you do?" he only shrugged. "I didn't fight. They fell." No sword killed Athens. It was arrogance that choked them from within. Xenophon. When Lysandros waited, he didn't close his eyes. He saw every mistake of the enemy and waited for them to step in, like a soldier laying a trap for a lost beast. Diodorus Siculus. The victory at Aegospotami wasn't as glorious as Marathon, not as sacred as Salamis, but it killed Athens more than any bloodshed ever did, and Lysandros, who never needed a glorious triumph, chose the perfect moment to let the enemy collapse from their own pride. In Athens, the news arrived like a blade through the night. The port of Piraeus descended into chaos. Mothers ran to the shore crying for their sons. Council officials argued non-stop. Some screamed it was treason. Others demanded the return of former generals. But it was too late. An empire that had once reached the heights of art, philosophy, and democracy now didn't have a single ship to defend itself. All because of a careless noon and an admiral who didn't need many words to win. Chapter 5, 404 before the Common Era. Athens falls, and a crownless king rises. No throne, no parade. He walked into Athens like a man collecting a debt, and everyone bowed. Athens surrendered. No crying, no blood, just the city gates opening in silence. Not because they didn't want to resist, but because they had nothing left. Starvation, civil war, and whispers that Sparta owns the sea. Desperation seeped from the agora to the hearth. from the poet to the fisherman. Athens didn't collapse. It crumbled piece by piece like roof tiles in a nameless storm. No fireworks, no poetry. A whole city-state that once wrote poems about war, now bowed before a man who never wrote any. Euripides, the great tragedian, had died in exile in Macedonia. Sophocles grew old in silence. The theatre of Dionysus was abandoned. Wooden masks left in the rain. No one cared to dry them. Athens had once been Apollo's instrument, now just a broken lyre lying in the middle of the square. Lysandros arrived at Piraeus like a wave without noise. He didn't ride a chariot. He wore no purple cloak, only old armor, no sword in hand, and behind him an army that no longer needed to fight. The Athenians stood by the roadside. No one dared throw stones, no one cursed, only eyes looking away as if to meet Lysandros's gaze was to confess guilt. When he stepped into the agora, once the center of debate, where Socrates had asked what is justice, Lysandros said nothing. He only raised his hand, and 30 names were read aloud. These are the men who will rule Athens. No vote, no debate, no democracy. Just a decision from someone who wasn't even an Athenian citizen. The 30 tyrants, not an official name but whispered by everyone. A council chosen by Lysandros set to reform Athens. In truth, to ensure Athens would never rise again. People asked, "Do you plan to flatten Athens?" Because that was the proposal from allies Corinth and Thebes city-states, so jealous of Athens' glory, they wanted to erase even the stone under the Parthenon. Corinth roared, that city must not survive to plant seeds of rebellion again. Thebes even suggested enslaving all Athenians and redistributing their land to neutral cities. But Lysandros shook his head. No, they must live, to remember. No ashes needed, just silence. He destroyed the city walls, not with swords, but with music. To the sound of flutes, Spartan soldiers pulled down the long walls linking Athens to Piraeus, the symbol of invincibility. That sound was not triumphant. It was more like a funeral than a victory parade. Lysandros's revenge spilled no blood, but cut deeper than any wound. He set up an invisible but tight system of control. A Spartan fleet stationed at Piraeus commanders, taking turns monitoring trade activity. Every grain shipment needed a signature. Every school meeting had ears in the walls. No guards, just humiliation as invisible shackles. He restored puppet governments, crushed democratic factions. He collected tribute, established a chain of allies under Spartan control. And then he left, did not stay, did not build his own empire. He gave Athens back to the Athenians, misshapen and broken. Someone whispered, "We still have the theatre, still have the Parthenon." But no one dared take the stage anymore. No one wrote poetry, because poetry could save no one now. Lysandros passed through Athens like a ghost, who had killed no one, but still terrified all. He wore no crown, but from that day on, all of Greece bowed as if a new king had risen. In a corner of the square, a boy of about 12 stood beside his father, fists clenched. He watched Lysandros's armored silhouette disappear behind the temple roof, then turned and whispered, "Father, one day I'll take Athens back." The father said nothing. He only placed his hand on his son's head and bowed to the back of the victor. 6. From 403 to 398. Before the Common Era. A cracking empire and the quiet betrayal. When the victor thought he was building an empire, the cracks had already begun from the very center. Athens didn't die. It was reborn quietly, like embers still glowing under the rain. And Lysandros, who believed he had shut the door of history, didn't know that very door was opening to a new chapter, one that wouldn't call him a hero. In the year 403, Thrasybulus, an Athenian exile, led a small resistance group from Philae, just a few dozen people, but their belief was as plentiful as grass after rain. They struck unexpectedly, overthrew the 30. And as if Athens remembered itself, democracy was restored without a single anthem. Lysandros, then in Samos, received the news without any expression. But behind that calm mask, he knew you can capture a city, but you can't capture memory. Sparta sent General Pausanias to restore order, but unlike Lysandros, Pausanias didn't believe in silence. He negotiated, compromised, signed a peace treaty with Athens' democratic faction. And Lysandros, once silenced all of Greece with his footsteps, was now pushed aside like a general left unnamed in the victory song. The empire Lysandros had built with such effort began to crack. Corinth, once a loyal ally, now openly criticized the mercy shown to Athens, calling it a strategic mistake. Thebes, once a supporter of total destruction, withdrew its envoys from military councils and began private negotiations with other city-states. The cities that once pledged allegiance to Lysandros now whispered that he was a seller of honor. Sparta, before it could become the new hegemon, was tangled in a web of power and envy. Rumors spread. Lysandros let Athens live because he wanted to rule it like a king. Sparta has no third king, but Lysandros acted like he wore a crown. Even in Sparta, the Ephori council began to grow wary of him. They couldn't charge him. He had made no mistake, but they started purging with laws. Every meeting came with a new decree. Budget cuts to the fleet, diplomatic authority stripped from Lysandros' allies. Military command returned to the royal family. No one spoke loudly, but all knives were laid on the table. Sparta, once in awe of him, now saw him as the shadow of ambition, and like so many who build empires with silence, Lysandros began to be forgotten. Very loudly. No more envoys stopped at his house. No more festivals invited him to speak. His name was cut from commander lists. None of this killed him, but each was a cut to his reputation, and for someone like Lysandros, that hurt like any real blade. When the winter of 398 came, and Spartan ships set sail without his command, Lysandros knew he had fallen from the center, and the center, like every empire before, was dissolving like circles drawn in water. Agesilaus, his old friend from youth, now king, no longer mentioned his name in court meetings. When Lysandros sent a letter requesting to join a military campaign in Asia Minor, the reply was merely a thank you, and nothing more. He understood. Exile needs no sentence. Being forgotten is enough. But sometimes forgetting is a form of imprisonment. Some say that in his final days in Sparta, Lysandros often wandered alone through the old agora. He said nothing. But every footstep echoed with the applause of long past victories. A child looked at him and asked his father, "Who is that?" The father hesitated, then said simply, "A name that was once great." And in the backstage of power, where there are no torches, only whispers, a new group of ephors was elected. They were younger, more alert, and saw Lysandros as a story that needed an ending. No need for assassination, no need for trial, just let history turn to a new page. without rereading the last line of the old one, and in Sparta's own archives, once preserving the names of those who brought glory to the homeland. Lysandros' name was moved from the section Hero of Achievement to a blank category. Only one note remained: no longer holds position. No one ordered the erasure, but time and silence did the job better than any decree. Chapter 7. The year 395, before the Common Era, the Battle of Haliartus, the death of a man who went too far, a battle, a road with no return, and a death that earned no statue. 40 years of sword and spear, 3 times forgotten, twice nearly supreme, and one final time to prove he still existed. In the year 395, before the Common Era, the Corinthian War broke out, like a seizure shaking an empire, trembling from its own victories. Sparta had won too much, too quickly, too completely. The city-states once subdued, Athens, Thebes, Corinth, could no longer bear the shadow of the victor. The allies who once shook hands with Lysandros now quietly changed sides. The feeling of an invincible Sparta made everyone decide, one more try. Athens, Thebes, Corinth, the once subdued city-states, now allied to strike back at Sparta, and Agesilaus, the king preparing to march on Asia Minor, suddenly needed someone to pave the way. Lysandros volunteered, not because he thought he would win, but because he feared being forgotten. In Sparta, they had begun speaking his name in the past tense. On the streets, the eyes no longer followed as they once had. And when an Ephor accidentally called Agesilaus the greatest liberator, Lysandros knew he had been replaced. This campaign wasn't about glory. It was about reclaiming a place in the memory of a cold and forgetful people. No one invited, no one ordered, but he knew this was the last chance to get back on the map. Not the map of land, but the map of memory. And so, he went to Boeotia, the land of those who never knelt. He was no longer an admiral, no longer a negotiator with Persian kings, just a frontline commander, leading a few thousand Spartans and allies into Haliartus. He went ahead as always. No reinforcements, no thorough scouting. And as if fate were toying with him, he walked into a trap. Thebes had set their forces behind the hills. As Lysandros neared the city walls, arrows and stones rained like early summer storms, without warning. His army broke. Men fell like grain in a whirlwind. He didn't run, didn't retreat. Lysandros, who once brought Athens to its knees, fell on the soil of Haliartus, and his body, like a message, was refused immediate return by Thebes. Only after days of negotiation, with an official plea from Sparta, did Thebes agree to release it. But not out of compassion, only to show the world, the one who once made them kneel now lay motionless in their hands. No trumpet, no drums, no comrades guarding the body. Sparta, upon hearing the news, held no state funeral. No one spoke his name in the council. When a young Ephor proposed a public memorial, Elder Gerastros simply said, "Lysandros no longer belongs to Sparta." No bronze statue, just a small group sent to retrieve his body, as if he were an anonymous soldier. No bronze statue, just a small group sent to retrieve his body, as if he were an anonymous soldier. They say, when they found his body, his eyes were still open, as if he didn't understand why the final battle held no glory. Some claimed the Theban soldiers took his ring. Some said they buried him in a shallow pit, no tombstone, no rite. But one tale tells of a former Athenian slave once captured after egospotomy, quietly covering him with dirt by hand, not out of forgiveness, just because he too was once human. History does not raise statues for those who go too far, and Sparta, the city once in awe of him, carved his name on a stone, smaller than standard, and that was it. No crown, no song. Only the Boeotian wind rustling the grass where Lysandros fell, as if to whisper, glory never waits a third time. Epilogue. The shadow of a man who won without being loved, when the past doesn't die, but simply lingers behind, like a shadow so long everyone wants to avoid it. Lysandros died, but his name Thebes had set their forces behind the hills. As Lysandros neared the city walls, arrows and stones rained like early summer storms. Without warning, his army broke, men fell like grain in a whirlwind. He didn't run, didn't retreat. Lysandros, who once brought Athens to its knees, fell on the soil of Haliartus, and his body, like a message, was refused immediate return by Thebes. Only after days of negotiation with an official plea from Sparta did Thebes agree to release it, but not out of compassion, only to show the world the one who once made them kneel now lay motionless in their hands. No trumpet, no drums, no comrades guarding the body. Sparta, upon hearing the news, held no state funeral. No one spoke his name in the council. When a young Ephor proposed a public memorial, Elder Gerastros simply said, Lysandros no longer belongs to Sparta. No bronze statue, just a small group sent to retrieve his body, as if he were an anonymous soldier. They say, when they found his body, his eyes were still open, as if he didn't understand why the final battle held no glory. Some claimed the Theban soldiers took his ring. Some said they buried him in a shallow pit. No tombstone, no rite. But one tale tells of a former Athenian slave, once captured after egospotomy, quietly covering him with dirt by hand, not out of forgiveness, just because he too was once human. History does not raise statues for those who go too far. And Sparta, the city once in awe of him, carved his name on a stone, smaller than standard, and that was it. No crown, no song. Only the Boeotian wind rustling the grass, where Lysandros fell as if to whisper, glory never waits a third time. Chapter 8. Epilogue. The shadow of a man who won, without being loved, when the past doesn't die, but simply lingers behind, like a shadow so long everyone wants to avoid it. Lysandros died, but his name didn't die with him. For decades after, the Greek city-state still invoked his name whenever they needed a warning about arrogance. Thebes, in their military reports, never forgot to slip in the line, the victory at Haliartus, where didn't die with him. For decades after, the Greek city-state still invoked his name whenever they needed a warning about arrogance. Thebes, in their military reports, never forgot to slip in the line, the victory at Haliartus, where the proud man fell. Athens, in democratic forums, mentioned him as an example of how a man could topple a whole republic with persuasion and a few Persian gold bags. Sparta was different. Sparta was the place he had delivered victory to, but also the place that never truly embraced him. After his death, the Ephors, the highest oversight council, held a closed session and quietly passed a new law. Limit the power of admirals, require a rotation of command. People called it the law to block Lysandros' shadow. Unofficially, but everyone knew, Sparta was silent, No praise, no denial, just a quiet letting go, like a breeze that carried the scent of a once fiery era. But that silence was a sentence too. A child named Lysandros, in the year 370, before the Common Era, was forced to change his name upon joining the army. A play about him was banned from being performed in the Agora of Corinth. And one scholar, trying to write a biography about him, was accused of promoting Spartan-style despotism, because the issue wasn't whether Lysandros won or lost, it was how he won, not with ideals, not with belief, but with coercion, flattery, manipulation, and the patience of someone who knew how to wait for others to slip. He wasn't the first Greek to win, but while Pericles was loved for building the Parthenon through victory, Lysandros was remembered for making freedom collapse in silence. While Alcibiades, who changed sides like changing robes, was still forgiven by Athens, Lysandros, utterly loyal to Sparta, was abandoned, perhaps because he lacked the charm of a silver tongue, and only had the cold effectiveness of someone who deeply understood what made people fall. But maybe he was the first to make victory feel like a wound. When Aristotle wrote of ideal politics, he never named Lysandros, but in his warnings of the slide from republic to tyranny, Lysandros' shadow appeared like an unnamed character, a persistent ghost, looming over the concept of victory at any cost. And so, Lysandros returned, not in poetry, but in caution. Not in monuments, but in whispered reminders. In Syracuse, a playwright once staged a comedy titled "The Victor Who Couldn't Pour Wine," said to be inspired by him. At the Theban market, a mother once scolded her child, "Don't talk like Lysandros. I don't want you thrown out of dinner." History doesn't forgive, but it remembers well. To keep your freedom, don't let a second Lysandros cross the threshold. No one built him a statue, but everyone feared meeting someone like him. Even during the era of Alexander the Great, who idolized Achilles and conquered half the world, it was noted that he avoided ever mentioning Lysandros in speeches about ancient strategies, not because he was forgettable, but because he made every victory feel uneasy. Lysandros had no school named after him, no heroic ballads, but his name, like a taboo, still haunted anyone who dreamed of controlling a city-state with nothing but silence and an unkept promise. In the year 330, before the Common Era, a scholar in Athens tried to publish a book called Strategy and Morality, Lessons from Lysandros. But the first lecture was interrupted by a protesting crowd. They threw bread and shouted, "Don't teach the children how to manipulate." That scholar never wrote history again. He switched to writing about birds. Because in ancient Greece, victory wasn't always something to learn from. Sometimes it was something to forget, if one wanted to keep their soul. But everyone feared meeting someone like him.